Hello, everyone. It's Brian here. Welcome to Genesis Day. Today, I'm going to, after all of these years, rank Genesis records from my least favorite to my favorite. I'm not going to say this is the worst, this is the best, because I don't know if I'm qualified to do that. And ranking is such a personal experience that you may well argue with my decisions, but that's okay. They're my decisions, my worst or my least favorite to my favorite. This is something I've wanted to do for quite some time. I've mentioned before that even before I had a channel, I made lists of various videos I'd like to make. Most of them I've never done, by the way. But I also ranked on this document a lot of artists. So I have rankings for dozens of bands. But I've only ever filmed two. One was Lou Reed and one was King Crimson. So I'm in a position now where I think I'd like to do some of those. So I'm going to start with Genesis. And this was prompted by a comment from David Atkinson on a recent video of mine in which Genesis came up. And I mentioned to him in that comment that I am well aware that he has done a ranking video for Genesis, but I haven't watched it. I deliberately did not watch it because I wanted to do mine first. So I guess I'm at the point where I'd like to see his video, so I need to do my ranking. I have watched one Genesis video ranking that was from Steve at All the World's a Stage. He's moved on to A is for Alice, B is for Bob. I believe that's the only other one I've watched. I haven't gone online and looked for other ranking videos. I haven't read reviews. I just want to take my personal experience with Genesis and try to present it in a ranking video. So, having said all of that, I guess there's nothing else I need to say. Now, there's one record from Genesis that I do not have in my collection. And maybe if I owned it, I'd feel differently about it. I have streamed it, and I listened to it quite recently just to circle back and see what it was all about. And that is Calling All Stations from 1997. So I'm putting that at number 15. And, as I say, if I had it in my collection and played it more frequently, I might feel differently about this record. But I'm just going with what I know from my experience. And there's nothing really wrong with this record. It is a competent record, right? This is the record after Phil Collins left. Ray Wilson is a very good singer. The music on the record is what we'd expect from Genesis. Really quality playing. I think it's really strong. There's a uniformity in sound to the record. It is safe in some ways. I do like the title track, Calling All Stations. The dividing line, I think, is pretty good. There was a single Alien Afternoon, which is okay. I'm never sitting around here on a weekend or evening thinking, gee, I'd really like to hear Congo again. Let's put that on. That never happens. So I guess that says a lot about the record. I would say from a production and musician standpoint and singing, it's excellent. It really is. It just didn't gel with me the way other Genesis records do. So there's a part of me that thinks maybe they should have stuck it out and come back and done a second record, and maybe they'd get past the sort of what are we doing here? How can we be Genesis if Phil Collins isn't here? And maybe we should, do another record. I think that might have been something they could do, kind of a missed opportunity. Also, I think maybe it would be interesting if they had gone back and maybe explored more of the prog origins of the band than they did. So, that's just my impression. And, I don't think I'll ever buy that record, but if I found the CD somewhere, I might get it. Number 14, which honestly could have flip-flopped with number 15, I have put We Can't Dance. And I think I read that this was their commercial peak at some point. I find that surprising because this record didn't really connect with me. Driving the Last Spike, I kind of appreciate in some ways because it's that epic 10-minute sort of thing. But the other tracks, No Son of Mine, I think was a single. I'm going to be lost on singles here. But the song that really irritates me is I Can't Dance. And that's the first exposure for me to this record, that song and that video, which I think is just goofy. And the video, yeah, I don't really get what they're trying to do there. And there's some songs here that I just generally don't like Way of the World, Fading Lights, Never a Time. Doesn't really work for me. This could have been 15. They could have switched them around. This is from 1991. And that wrapped up the Phil Collins years until they did their reunion tour, so their goodbye tour. Yeah. Number 13, I have chosen Invisible Touch from 1986. I think one thing to keep in mind with this record is that And I'll say this about another record too. In 1985, Phil released No Jacket Required, his third solo record. You know, I'm always amused by the fact that Phil Collins became a giant pop star. He's kind of an unlikely star in a way because he comes from, first of all, behind the drum kit, reluctantly becomes the face of Genesis, and then has this career as a solo artist that was, in some respects, really surprising. So there's some people who would argue that this is simply a Phil Collins solo record masquerading as a Genesis record. I don't really believe that because there are some elements on here that don't really fit with Phil Collins, but as a solo artist. But, you know, a song like Throwing It All Away could easily have been a Phil Collins solo record. It's funny that even when we drive in the car somewhere, you know, we hear Phil Collins songs, we hear Genesis songs, and sometimes Cecile will say, "That's Phil Collins, right?" And I say, no, that's Genesis. Or she'll say, "That's Genesis, right?" I say, "No, that's Phil Collins." And I can understand how a non-serious fan would have that reaction because in some respects they sound similar because of the voice, I guess. But he was everywhere in the early 80s on the radio and whatnot. Now, Invisible Touch, the title track, I've never liked that song. I don't like the sound of it. I don't like the keyboards. I don't like the vocals. I don't like the delivery. Tonight is better. Land of Confusion, I appreciate, possibly because of the video. In Too Deep, What else? Domino, part 2 of Domino, I think is quite good. Has a bit of that prog element to it. The Brazilian is okay. Don't like the album cover. For what it's worth, there's a terrible inner photo there. The lyrics. So yeah, I put it way down the list for various reasons, I guess. Number 12. I've chosen from Genesis to Revelation, the first record from 1969, when the band were teenagers, 18, I think they were 18 or so. So we have Peter Gabriel, Anthony Phillips, Anthony Banks, Michael Rutherford, John Silver. So in other words, no Phil Collins, no Steve Hackett. It's not what I expected. I didn't hear this record for the first time until I bought this copy after Record Store Day 2014. I found a copy on sale. It was $10 in a bin for this 180 gram version, and I have to say, yeah, it's not what I expected at all. It doesn't have the 70s prog sound that many people will know. They're shorter songs, 3 to 4 minutes. Well, one's only 2:08 and one's under 2 minutes, so all songs written by Genesis. In the first Genesis box set, they start with 1970 to 1975. They leave this out, and maybe they feel it doesn't qualify as a real Genesis record. By the way, this has been released many, many times in various album designs with various track listing. I think some CDs have bonus tracks, but it's probably the best Genesis record of the 60s. So it didn't really connect with me. But again, if you're a Peter Gabriel fan, there's a reason to dig into it. He does the vocals, flute, accordion, tambourine, that sort of thing. But there's a mellotron on here, the dulcimer, guitars, you know, a whole interesting range of instruments. But I was thinking about this record because when I was trying to get into it years ago, I often wouldn't even remember from one listen to the next what the song sounded like. I just kind of forgot. So not a commercial success by any means. Now, number 11, 1983's self-titled Genesis record. And again, the Hello, I Must Be Going came out the year before. This one, so Phil was again everywhere. This is kind of a schizophrenic record. First of all, I hate the cover. I hate the design of everything with this. My friends and I, though, were quite enamored with the track Mama. We just listened to it. We thought it was weird. We thought it was cool. I don't know if it was weird or cool, but it was certainly interesting. So that's an interesting track. That's All. Again, another track that could easily have fit on a Phil Collins record. It's kind of a snappy little pop song that I don't mind. And Home by the Sea, Second Home by the Sea, sort of a prog effect. Or effort. Side 2, I find less interesting. Illegal Alien, if you combine that track with the video, I just find it really tasteless. Maybe that wasn't the intent. Taking It All Too Hard, that could be a Phil Collins song. Just a Job to Do, I think is stupid. Silver Rainbow, okay, it's going to get better. Nah, I don't really like it. So it's a weird record. I liked it far better back then than I do now, and I don't even know. I probably haven't played this in over 10 years. Believe it or not, maybe longer than that. It's a weird record, but also one of those strange things where it's self-titled, but it's like way down the line. Number 10, and then there were 3 when the band became a trio after the departure of Steve Hackett. And this is, I guess some people would argue that this is the first effort, well, not the first effort, but the first time they had a real hit single. I mean, other things charted, I think, but Follow You, Follow Me was a single for them that was quite successful. I don't know where I got this, but it's kind of beat up. It has a old price sticker on it too. So a trio, interestingly, they didn't bother, and it's kind of like the feature. The people left. Peter Gabriel left. They didn't replace him. Steve Hackett left. They didn't replace him. So I think it's interesting that they decided to continue. Now, one of the things I find interesting about the progression from Genesis as a prog band to a more pop-oriented band is this suggestion that Phil Collins was responsible for changing the sound of the band. Now, I've heard interviews with all members of the band who say that was a band decision. It wasn't Phil Collins' decision. So those of you who criticize or credit Phil Collins for making them change their sound, I think that's wrong. By the way, I don't really like this album cover either. This is a record that I don't listen to very often. In fact, I don't know it as well as some other ones. Just, I don't know why. It just maybe didn't work for me, but it's not bad. Follow You, Follow You, Follow You, Follow Me, I think is a really good song. Number 9, second record from 1970 called Trespass, and the first Genesis record that really gets to the true prog sound that I guess they would develop. Possibly the most underrated Genesis record. The album cover here has a little design that looks like a knife, referencing the track Knife on here, which I believe to be the most popular track from this record. After Anthony Phillips left, Phil Collins would join on the next record. I was thinking about this record because it's another one of the records I don't listen to very often, and I think the reason was when I had my records boxed up, I had a lot of Genesis compact discs, but I don't have this one on compact disc, so it's not one I went to very often. But I think it's actually really good. You could say it was the first proper Genesis record after that From Genesis to Revelation record. So not bad. It just hints at where they're going to go to. Number 8, I've chosen Abacab from 1981. And of course, just to put it in context, Phil Collins' first record, Face Value, came out in 1981, followed in 1982 by Hello, I Must Be Going. This is a strange record. It in some ways is probably the most, the Genesis record that sounds least like Genesis, if that actually makes any sense. I do have a soft spot for this record because at the time this came out, a friend of mine had just bought a new system. So he had a linear tracking turntable. I think it was a Sony, and he had a pair of Bose 901s possibly. Maybe not the most audiophile speakers, but man, they were loud. So he would blast like Abacab, No Reply at All, Keep It Dark, me and Sarah Jane. They sort of had something. They kind of had this infectious sound to them. I don't think many people would put this higher than this on their list. I'm not sure. But, Who Done It? Man on the Corner. Okay. There's some tracks that are kind of less interesting to me. And I think this came out in a lot of different, with a lot of different colors. This is just the one that I have. So this album for me is more about memory than maybe Genesis. I don't really love the album cover here. And then there's a picture of the guys there. So, okay, as I say, I rank it higher just because of memories and nostalgia, but it's not bad. Number 7 is, from 1980, Duke. This is the first Genesis record I ever owned. I was given this LP as a gift. No, not this LP, because I sold a lot of my records, so I had to buy this back years later, but I had an original pressing. This is also an original pressing. It's probably the same one that I had. This has prog elements, but also has pop elements. So it starts with Between the Lines. It ends with Duke's Travels and Duke's End. I love those pieces. I like Heat Haze. It has 2, I guess they're top 40 tracks, Misunderstanding and Turn It On Again. And I understand why some Genesis fans don't like those. Turn It On Again, though, has a really interesting time signature. I think I read it was in 13/8 or something like that. Now, when I got this record, I put it on the turntable in the living room of my parents' house. It was one of those console things with the 8-track player and the stereo. And my sister's boyfriend was there, and he had this look on his face like he was being tortured, and he kind of pleaded with me to take it off. And I thought this was really interesting. I had this poster in my room. Somehow I got that, and I guess you should never trust the older generations. He was older than me, and then years later he bought Invisible Touch, which he absolutely loved. And I thought there's something wrong in the universe if you think Invisible Touch is better than this record. But yeah, I think this is really good. I watched the When in Rome DVD. Well, it was actually on YouTube. I think it's been on and off there a few times. And the songs really held up. I thought they sounded really great live. I've never seen Genesis in concert, believe it or not. Okay. Number 6, 1971's Nursery Cryme. The first truly great Genesis record. I should have mentioned that I was once in an online forum somewhere and some people were discussing what is the last truly great Genesis record, and this is my choice for the last truly great Genesis record. This may be the first truly great Genesis record. And I love the album design here, sort of whimsical, maybe Alice in Wonderland-ish, the croquet scene. I think this is fabulous. Starts with the Musical Box. By the way, there's a band called the Musical Box that comes through here every now and again that does a tribute show, which are apparently quite good. Kind of as a foreshadowing of sorts, Phil Collins sings the lead on For Absent Friends. The Return of the Giant Hogweed is a song that gets a lot of attention. And this is the classic lineup. Now we've got like Tony Banks, Michael Rutherford, Peter Gabriel, Steve Hackett, and Phil Collins. This is a really great record, if you ask me. I believe, though, from what I had read years ago, that the reviews at the time weren't that great. But as is often the case, reviewers don't know what they're talking about, and retrospective reviews have been better. But I think this is a really good record. Number 5. In the top 5, it's hard to distinguish 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You may disagree. You might think the next record is higher. That's fine. This is a record that was made without Peter Gabriel, of course. 1976, Wind and Wuthering. A record I didn't really know about at the time. After all, my first record was from 1980. But even then, I didn't listen to this record for many, many years after this. I'm not really sure why. I guess I was rationing my money and buying things I was interested in. And this came to me kind of on the late side. This is before you could stream things. And so you kind of had to have the record to hear it. But this really appealed to me. The 11th Earl of Mar is a great song. I kind of like Watt Gorilla. Your Own Special Way is not that great, if you ask me. It didn't connect with me. Blood on the Rooftops, not sure about that one. But there's some really solid tracks on here. Now I have to wonder, what were they thinking going into the studio without Peter Gabriel? That must have been quite an interesting experience. But this record surprised me in many ways. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, but I think there's a lot in here to like. So I put that at number 5. Number 4 from 1972, I have Foxtrot. I think there's a gatefold of this. Mine is a Canadian. I think most of these are Canadian. This is a Canadian single sleeve thing. Again, really interesting design on the album here. I think this just shows the band continued to mature. Their musical vision is maturing. You may already know that it has Watcher of the Sky is a really well-known, famous song. Get 'Em Up by Friday. And side 2 is mostly Supper's Ready, 22 minutes and 57 seconds. That's a marquee, well-known, established epic from the band. This is prog, art rock, maybe I can see how some people would put this higher than I did. I can easily understand why someone would rank this at number 1. A really good album. I think it got a lot of praise as well, so I really like that one. Number 3, we have The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, a concept album of sorts, I guess. When you think of the albums in the order in which they were released, this strikes me as a very strange follow-up to Selling England by the Pound. It just goes in a weird direction. But I think any Peter Gabriel fan would appreciate this for many reasons. And it's weird to think that he left after this record, but he did. I guess maybe he went as far as he could go. But it's a double record. I think this would be the only double studio. Well, I'm not sure about Calling All Stations, if that's double or single or whatever, but double concept record, 1974. So Peter Gabriel was with the band for 7 records and then decided to leave. This is a really amazing record, and I do find that it took me a long time to get into it. I had it first on compact disc, and I would listen to it and think it's really dense. Certain things stood out, like "The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway," of course, and "The Light Lies Down on Broadway." Or dies down, and then we have "Fly in the Windshield," of course, and "The Cage," the Broadway melody. I mean, there are some really classic things like "The Carpet Crawlers," but it took me a long time to really appreciate this record. And I think if I keep listening to this in many years, maybe it would move up the list, to be honest. But I found it kind of dense at the beginning. And as I said, it's really weird that it's a follow-up to "Selling England by the Pound." It doesn't... I would never put them in that order if I had heard them. There's some nice inner sleeves here. So, and then Peter left after that, which I find kind of interesting. All right, where are we now? We're at number 2, which... And I will say the next 2 records, number 1 and number 2, have in my mind flipped back and forth because I find them really hard to separate, believe it or not. And that number 2, I put "A Trick of the Tail." And again, a weird follow-up to "The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway." I don't think, if you listen to these, I don't think you would logically place this after "The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway." Love the album cover here, by the way. And this is just filled with classics: "Dance on a Volcano," "Entangled," "Squonk," "Madman," "Moon," "Robbery, Assault and Battery," "Ripples," "A Trick of the Tail," "Los Endos." I may have said in the past that this is my favorite Genesis record. I possibly did in a comment somewhere, and it could be. I mean, it's so close. Now, I mentioned this guy repeatedly from my days at university. He would come to my room and just lend me music, and somehow I think I borrowed records or something. I made a tape of side A was "A Trick of the Tail" and side B was "Selling England by the Pound." I listened to them religiously for many years, but this might seem strange to you, but there was a time when I didn't realize the singer had changed. I thought it was the same singer because they sound similar to me on these 2 records, but I didn't know that this was Phil Collins singing and "Selling England by the Pound" was Peter Gabriel until years later. And I was like, how stupid could I have been? But I mean, this is just a genius. There's also some weird conspiracy theories that argue that Phil Collins pushed Peter Gabriel out of the band, but everyone has said that is not true. But yeah, I think this is fantastic. So that leaves only 1 record left, and that is "Selling England by the Pound." Such a great record. But I flip-flopped on this. But currently, I would say this is my favorite Genesis record. Starts with "Dancing on the Moonlit Night." Fantastic. I mean, you could just say this is a masterpiece. It's timeless. "I Know What I Like in Your Wardrobe." That song really connected with me. It seems so weird. What are the lyrics about? Like, "I'm just a lawnmower. You can tell me by the way I walk. I know what I like in your wardrobe." Weird. "Firth of Fifth." The piano introduction to that is phenomenal. "More Fool Me," sung by Phil Collins. "The Battle of Epping Forest," "After the Ordeal." "The Cinema Show." What a great track. That song really is timeless to me. There's something very English about this record, and I'm saying that as a person who's only visited England. I don't know if that's true or not, but a great lineup here. This is a beautiful record. I love the album cover too, and I also think that some reviewers didn't get this at the time. Not that I remember them from the time, but I remember seeing people comment on the fact that some reviewers didn't understand this record, which, again, tells you everything you need to know about reviewers. But great record. So that is my attempt at looking at all the Genesis records. I know many people will disagree with me. You might think I've lost my mind. You might think Calling All Stations should be higher. You might disagree with these, but that's fine. It's all a personal decision. But I would be interested to know if you agree or disagree, or what your favorites are. Thanks for watching, and then my next order of business is to watch David's video on his Genesis ranking. So I will see you in the next video. Talk to you later.